Hello everyone, this is Mark Forbes at Inetco. Welcome to the first webinar in our series, Banks Gone Digital. Today we're going to talk about how to track customer interaction across channels and get into some more detail on that. This is an ongoing series of webinars, so we will be filling in other topics, and we're always responsive and welcome to your feedback on things that you'd like to see. So as we're going through today's session, if you have any ideas on where you'd like us to go next and what you'd like us to see us cover as part of this series, we'd welcome that feedback. There is a questions facility for those of you who are new to BrightTalk. If you submit your questions, they'll all queue up for me, and we'll have a look at those at the end of the presentation and go through all of those. We'll also be using several polls during today's presentation, asking you a few questions to understand a little bit better about where you're coming from and what people are looking for. So as those questions come up, please, you'll notice that your screen will change and you'll have the ability to vote multiple choice style. Please do submit your answer for those votes if the questions are at all relevant to you, and that'll actually kind of help me frame up how I'm going to handle some of the next parts of the presentation. A little bit like a choose your own adventure novel today. I'll focus a little bit differently based on what I hear back from you. This session will be available in a recorded version afterwards as well, and we'll make sure you have access to that link. And towards the end, we'll also make a few resources available, and in fact those are available now, some detailed white papers and things like that we have available as follow-on content. And with that, I think we'll get started. So I'll start with a little bit of a personal story here. I have a daughter who's in a song and dance class right now, and her song, for better or for worse, is one of the ones from Aladdin, and so we've been listening to it on repeat, and we've been watching the Aladdin movie probably a little bit more than I would personally choose to watch it. But there's one particular segment, as you know, that the whole story of Aladdin is that he discovers the lamp with the genie in it, and it changes his world initially, not really for the good, and then eventually for the good as it all plays itself out. But one of the segments in there that kind of peaked for me was the genie's dilemma. And I think it's best done in the Disney version, where he's got great big powers and itty-bitty living space. And I think for many channel executives, that's a bit of the same quandary. You've got huge ambitions and also huge expectations on you as to where your channel will go. So whether you're in the ATM channel, whether you're handling a branch channel, a mobile channel, the expectations are ramping up, but so are your ambitions in terms of what you'd like to see and how you want to be able to serve your customer. But often you have sort of, again, itty-bitty working space. You're charged with breaking new ground, but you're often restricted by the culture, by the technology, be it legacy or even what's available to you on the market, and restricted by the data that you have available in terms of driving decision-making and really being able to understand what customers are doing and what's happening. And so it's this quandary that I actually want to spend a lot of today talking about, and talking about how understanding customer interactions can help break a little bit of the logjam here. And actually what I want to do is put out the first poll today, and to understand a little bit more about how you see this quandary from your standpoint. So with that, what I'd like to understand is, what do you see as the largest impediment to your omni-channel ambitions? Is it culture? You're too set, you're too siloed in your own ways, and it's difficult to get the sponsorship from the bank leadership that you'd like to see? Is it legacy technology? You can't get the banking systems you have to do what it is you want and what you need them to do? Is it new technology? That it's taking too long to adopt new products or applications. In other words, you see what you need, but you can't get it running and get it deployed. Or does it really come down to customer data? You can't access the timely data, so decisions are often made by feel. And I'm seeing the votes start to come in now. I'm going to pause for a moment here and let everybody get a chance to weigh in. And yes, I think we are forcing you to choose one here, so pick your most significant one. And it's an interesting thing that one of the analyst firms we work most closely with is Celent, and Celent has been tracking customer analytics and new channel systems, obviously, for quite a while. And it's interesting, in their minds, it's always a mix of these different things that are coming up, but often it really is the challenge of getting a project, it's all of these together, the challenge of getting a project off the ground, of figuring out how to wire the technology together, and how to get the data to really determine what makes the most sense and what should be happening. Still seeing a few votes trickle in here, which is great. I'm going to give it one more minute and then I'll put the results up. And I believe you guys can see these as they're going. So largest impediment to omnichannel ambition. Okay, legacy technology seems to be the biggest blocker, not a surprise there, followed by new technology, and then followed closely by data and culture. And it's interesting. I think, in my mind, there is quite a close relationship between culture and data. So A and D are quite closely related, and B and C, to me, are quite closely related as well. Okay, it looks like we've got a good handful of votes in. So, excellent. Let me just stop the vote here. Thank you very much for the feedback. Okay. Now, I guess actually, before I go to this next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the root of this problem, because I think that it really does come down to a combination of culture, of data, and of technology. But part of it really comes down to the fact that the old data sources that a bank's culture were built around don't work as well as they used to. You know, and there's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek here that named Debbie. Debbie is the super teller. You all know at least one Debbie in your organization. There's probably one in every major branch of significance. Someone who seems to be able to really maintain the pulse of the customer, who's very vocal about how things need to change, what's working, what's not working. This could be someone in the branch as a teller. This could be someone who's an insurance agent. If you're selling insurance, it could be someone who's one of your financial advisors. But there's always someone out there who seems to have a good read on the customer and who's really kind of a good bellwether for what's going on within a particular geography or region or customer segment even. And if you have enough of these, you really kind of have a sensor network across the bank. You can think of your Debbies as a sensor network. The root of the problem, though, is this works very well in a human interaction model like the branch, where we really can depend on human beings interacting with human beings to tell us what's happening. The challenge, though, really comes in the fact that we've sort of tried to adapt our model of decision-making and data capture partially to the new world of digital channels, but not completely. So in the model where you had human beings providing great information coming up from the branches, your leadership could really make decisions based on feel. But really, those decisions, even though we pretended they were made by feel or by gut, were actually made by pretty good qualitative data coming up from the field and from the individual customer interaction points. So we had good data. We just maybe didn't think about it as data, as numbers, as statistics, et cetera. But we had a good feel, we had a good pulse that came up centrally in the organization. We were able to make decisions sort of on what at least felt like making decisions by feel. Now that's getting a lot harder to do across digital channels. And what we're seeing within a lot of banking environments is we're still trying to make decisions partly based on feel, but we simply don't have as good an information. The information sources are far poorer. We don't have that same sensor network across the digital infrastructure that we do in the traditional branch infrastructure. And closing that gap is really a key part of changing the way that we're able to make decisions and the banks are able to make decisions. So this particular example is from the London Telegraph, showing an exceptional example of parking by feel. I'm not actually sure how this one worked, whether this person actually parked in there or is trying to get out of this spot, but it's the same message, which is there's only so much you can do by feel. At the end of the day, you really need to be able to be this person on the sidewalk surveying the situation and really determining how this is going to work and what to do. I thought about the title of this slide being Data is the New Debbie, and I thought maybe I'd trademark that, but I went with a more traditional title here. But this is really what I want to spend today talking about. And I think it's not an accident that the voting numbers between data and culture were so similar, because to me these are really two sides of the same coin. In order to adapt your culture and become more wired towards digital channels, more able to make key decisions in those spaces, you need data to do that. In fact, I'd argue that data is the lifeblood of a modern channel strategy. But I'm talking about a particular kind of data here. I'm talking about customer interaction data. We have lots of data in banks. We have financial data, we have product data, service data, fee structure data, performance data, all sorts of different metrics. But we often don't have a good source of customer interaction data, which gets back to this notion of the Debbie in the branch providing that customer interaction data and trying to close that gap now. So the key here is being able to access this data, being able to analyze it to make sense of it, being able to present it in a way that it can actually drive a conversation with all the key stakeholders and drive a conversation centered around data, centered around what we think we knew about the results and the patterns that we're seeing, not a conversation based on hypotheticals and where we think we might feel like to go. And most importantly, being able to repeat this process consistently anytime you need to. Because often, we can work really hard to drag together the data and the information we need to make one decision, but it's almost as if that data evaporates, or certainly it gets stale the second we've made the decision. And there often isn't that same desire to put in the Herculean effort to get it together the second time to track things. So we're often able to pull together and move mountains to get an initiative off the ground. But then on an ongoing basis, becoming data-driven and being able to really see the patterns and see what's going on is a lot harder to do and a lot more expensive to do. So it really is important to not only be able to access, analyze, and present data, but to be able to repeat it consistently anytime you need to. And I think this, to me, starts to get at the core of what it means to be data-driven. Not only is data such a critical part of your culture and how you drive decision-making, but you have repeatable, consistent processes for getting at that data and using it to make decisions. And with that, I'm actually going to open things up to our second poll, and we want to understand a little bit more about how you view yourself as an organization in terms of your journey to become data-driven. I'm going to push another vote out here in a moment. And it was interesting, we actually had two flavors of this question we were considering, because when we were looking at some of the Celent research that had been done here, there was a very big difference between intent or desire to be data-driven and actual where people felt like they were on that matrix. And if you're not a Celent, or if you are a Celent subscriber, pardon me, I would encourage you to dig into their detail on this, because they really get into some of the key drivers and reasons and obstacles behind becoming a data-driven organization. Okay, looks like we've got about half our votes in, so I'll let this stay open for a little longer. I'm just going to switch over and look at the results myself as they're coming in. Interesting. Okay, so a lot of you are kind of scoring yourselves right in the middle. Okay, but there's still a fair number in the agree category, which is great. About a quarter of our viewers so far are in that agree category, which is great. It means you're well on the way to that journey. And it's interesting, I always look at neutral as I always wish I could ask about 10 more questions in the neutral category, because often that really comes down to there are some areas where we have lots of data and we use it really effectively, and there are other areas in which we have no data whatsoever and we're going on feel. So there's a huge spectrum, often in neutral, and what I find is people are often giving themselves that grade because they feel like they're good in some spots and not so good in others. Maybe even have too much data to deal with in some spaces and almost none in other areas. Okay. Well, this is good. This gives us kind of a read. So it looks about 20% or so are in the disagree category, so are sort of beginning that journey or feeling a little bit skeptical about where you are right now. It looks like about another 35% are on the way, and the bulk of you, the remaining 45%, are right down the middle, which honestly makes sense with where we're at. I want to drill in a little bit more on this notion of customer interactions now, and why it's so important to track them. And I really do distinguish customer interaction data from a lot of the other kinds of data that we deal with in a banking environment. It's different than financial data. It's different than product and service data. It's different than traffic data, but it's connected to all of those. But customer interaction data is really about understanding when a customer walks into a branch, when a customer picks up their mobile device, when they walk up to an ATM, what do they do during that session? What does that interaction look like? And the goal here is really to put together all of those little interactions and get a single view into how your services are being used, into how customers are interacting across all of your different banking channels. So customer interactions and tracking them gives you that basis to start with. It also allows you to leverage operational data, to leverage things like cash movement data and customer experience data to get good at what I call the basics, which is making sure your environment's performing the way that it needs to. So you've got the response times, you've got the success rates that you need to, allowing you to really analyze the customer experience. So giving you that base of data so you can understand. Let's give a simple example. When someone checks their balance on a mobile device, is it about as responsive as when they check their balance on the ATM, online, through a kiosk in the branch? Does that experience feel similar? Does it behave in a similar way? Does the customer respond in a similar way? And then really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do, especially across digital channels, is identify new revenue streams. Because one of the real strengths of the branch environment is that is where we're able to really move the needle in terms of revenue. That's where we have the ability to upsell and cross-sell and all those types of things. And those capabilities are still very nascent in the digital channel, and we're trying to figure out how to move from purely a cost basis on the digital channel side to a true revenue basis and being able to put compelling offers in front of people. And so tracking customer interactions helps you spot those signals that indicate a customer might be ready for a different product or service, or a different fee structure, or a fundamentally different relationship with the bank. And being able to track customer interaction gives you those signal points, and once you begin to understand those, then you can figure out how to use the technology you have in place to automatically respond to those signals through the right channel and the right touch point. And then at the end of the day, I think most channel executives I talk to, their brains are full of questions about customers and their usage of the channel and what their wants and their preferences are. And often the issue is not coming up with the questions, the issue is answering those questions. And so being able to get that on-demand information so that you're able to very quickly think of a question, look to the data to answer that question, and then decide what to do about it. So basically, improving your agility and shortening the time between coming up with a question and being able to actually answer it with data. Because as we all know, I often like to think about the gap between asking a question and having data as the most dangerous zone, because that's the one where everybody's got their theories. And often it becomes a political battle in who has the loudest voice. And you have no ability to really prove which theory is the most appropriate in that kind of envelope between coming up with the question and actually getting the data to answer the question. So now when we think about customer interaction data and collecting it and analyzing it and accessing it and presenting it, we get down to some key requirements. And that's really the core of today is we want to talk about how to track customer interactions, customer interaction data. So the first piece is customer interaction data really presents as transactional data. But I want to expand your notion of transaction data. Often when as a banker, you think of transaction data, you think of financial transactions. Money moving from point A to point B. Money moving out of account 1 to account 2. Transactional data is actually generated anytime a customer does anything. So you may think of things as, there's a lot of non-financial data, for instance. Someone logging into a mobile application. A balance inquiry often never will result in a transaction being entered in your general ledger, but it's very important to know how often someone's doing that and where they're doing it from. And for instance, a signal, that could be an important signal. Someone doing a balance inquiry on a particular channel may be an indicator that they're planning some other kind of transaction. They're trying to figure out if they have enough money to do something, for instance. So being able to see what you might think of as non-financial transactions alongside financial transactions is really important. So to me, when I talk about transactional data, I'm talking about all of those different touch points or events that are generated as a customer interacts with you, regardless of which channel or technology base they use to do that. So whether that's someone making an inquiry at the teller, whether that's someone using a kiosk in your branch, whether it's someone using your tablet banking from home, all of that transactional data and getting access to it regardless of which channel it's occurring in is really, really important. You need that base to start with. Now, that's a phenomenal amount of data. So the next piece is being able to transform it into something that's actually ready to analyze. Because at the end of the day, as channel executives, our job isn't to sit there buried in Excel moving numbers around, but we need to really be able to get a feel for the data, to work with it, to interact with it, to test our hypotheses and our theories out. And increasingly, while we can rely on analysts to pull data together for us, we need to be able to be good at actually managing and handling that data ourselves. So part of making this data ready to analyze is blending in complementary data. So for instance, if we're dealing with ATM data, for instance, I may want to blend in competitor locations. I may want to blend in card data so I can see which institutions' cards are being used at my ATM. I may want to blend in weather data so I can understand how weather patterns might be affecting interactions. Similarly, if I'm looking at the mobile channel, I may want to blend in data about branch locations so I can see how far a mobile customer is away from a branch, because this may indicate how they're transacting and where they're transacting. I may want to see whether they're close to retail locations, where I may want to start a co-partnership agreement to either place an ATM or to place a mini branch, as many of us are looking at how we decrease our branch footprint. So this complementary data is really important to provide context. So you're not just looking at the customer's interaction in isolation, but you're looking at it from a geographic context, from a weather context, and in terms of their overall interaction with your banking environment. And the second piece that comes to really moving this out of the realm of the analyst is automatically applying models and algorithms to the data to make it much easier to understand. So an example here would be automatically pulling all of the customer's interaction data together into a session, so that you can see when you're dealing with a mobile banking customer, you can see all the different things that they're doing within a session. And perhaps instead of looking at the individual customer, now you're looking at the 10 different types of customer personas that are using your mobile banking application and what they're doing. And so models and algorithms can help do that. On the self-service side, models and algorithms can help you predict when you're going to run out of cash, or whether you have higher than normal cash usage in a particular branch, in a particular self-service location, so that you can respond to that. So those models and algorithms really help make you a lot smarter so that you're not just dealing with data, you're really dealing with information that helps you make decisions. Now, at the end of the day, most of us are in the position of having to put a business case together to make an investment, to make a change, to drive change to the organization. And that's fine. That's a very good discipline. What I often find, though, is the better you're able to analyze and present the information, the stronger a case you're able to build. And often when you end up in these business case presentations, something changes. Someone asks a question from left field. So you need to be able to interact with the data, navigate, present it, explore it, do what-if scenarios, and actually be very agile with how you're presenting and delivering the results of your analyses to various people in the organization so that you can actually drive change. The last thing you want to do is end up walking in with the perfect set of PowerPoint slides that are missing the one data point that the head of retail delivery needs in order to make a decision. So you walk out of the room to capture that extra data point, and you knew that you had it, it just wasn't at hand, you couldn't change your PowerPoint. Presentation is so important, and it's so important to making a good case, and it's so important to being able to move with the room and being able to sell your idea within the organization. So when we get to key requirements, when I'm thinking about customer interaction data, it starts with access. It starts with universal access across channels, regardless of data, regardless of customer. It continues into being able to get that data into a ready-to-analyze state and to have that process be as automated as possible. So it's not you doing this work. It's not an analyst in your organization doing this work. It's software doing it for you. That's where technology can really have an impact. And then it's giving you the powerful tools you need to present that information and interact with it and expose it to others in the organization so that this doesn't just become your own personal view of the world. This is something that you can share with others and ideally have them benefit from it and begin to contribute to your channel strategy. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't shift a little bit from talking to key requirements to talking about iNetco and how we fit into this mix. And so I don't want this to become a huge product presentation, but I wanted to make the point that our iNetco analytics solution is able to provide this customer view across any channel. There's a reason that we're so focused on this, which is that we think this is really the key for any retail bank trying to acquire new customers, trying to handle disruption from competitors, and trying to really compete in the modern environment, is being able to see what's going on across any channel in your organization. So we have a number of different solutions that are available today and that we're working on with customers. The first one is an omnichannel solution. So this is the ability, we figure it's really key to be able to see what your channel mix looks like for any particular customer. See how a customer moves across channels and what their volumes look like and how that changes by time of day and everything else. This really, to us, is the fundamental part of understanding in a multi-channel world where to put your investments and how to actually direct your customer experience ambition. And then we have specific solutions for the various channels, for ATM and self-service, for the payment side, both in a payments processing world, so if you're a processor or if you're a bank doing your own processing, for the card issuing and card acquiring segment, for the point-of-sale business, and then also for the digital banking. And in that we put both the online and the mobile, because increasingly we're seeing those as sort of two sides of the same coin. But often there's a really key pressure to figure out what the customer's usage mix is between online and mobile and which features belong in which platform and how to support those investments going forward. And with this, actually, I'm interested in the next poll in understanding where your focus is today. And so I'm going to just switch over and put a poll forward here. I wanted to understand for the group that we're talking to today, which of these solutions is most relevant to your channel strategy in 2016-2017? Is it getting that omni-channel view, and by that I mean understanding how a customer uses different channels? Is it specifically more on the ATM and self-service side, on the processing side, the payment side, on the issuing, acquiring side, or on the digital banking side. Okay, so preliminary feedback so far is very heavily on Omnichannel, followed by ATM and self-service next. Okay. Not a surprising set of results. I think that most bank executives and most digital channel executives I speak with are really trying to understand that channel mix and how customers move between channels, and so it's no accident that this is a really important focus area for ourselves as well from a product and the solution standpoint. Because I think it really is critical to be able to get that picture of the customer session, their interaction, and be able to capture signals from the customer's activity in every channel and use those to figure out what they need, what they want, and what channel to deliver it to them in. I think it's also interesting to see ATM self-service up there. You know, I think many of us look at that as one of the oldest channels, the oldest digital channel certainly, that we've been running. But I think a lot of the banks I speak to are thinking very actively about the role of ATM and self-service as part of their branch transformation initiatives, and increasingly how it does couple with the mobile experience as well. Because at the end of the day, the ATM is the least expensive way to hand cash out to a customer. So how do you use that ATM as part of other channels to provide that cash fulfillment point when people need it, as well as for certain types of transactions, there may be a security or a trust component that you have certain consumers who want to execute that transaction in a safe and secure location in front of software and hardware that's controlled by you as the bank, as opposed to doing it in a mobile channel or doing it in a more public location. So it's really interesting to me to look at the role of ATM and self-service in both the branch transformation point, but also recognizing that besides the branch teller itself, it's probably the most trusted and secure channel from a customer perception standpoint. Then finally, we see about 14% on the digital banking side. That one's actually crept up as I've been talking, the mobile and online, which makes complete sense. I think a lot of channel execs I talk to are trying to figure out the right mix between those two channels, and also trying to figure out how to shift those channels from purely an operational cost model to one where they're generating revenue and they're actually able to sell and market to the customer. Last point I want to make, just talking very briefly about the analytics suite. I won't go into a lot of detail about this, but 2 points. Transaction data, when you start to think about this, is a big data problem. There are thousands of transactions flowing per second. There are at least hundreds and probably thousands of customer interactions and sessions happening at any given time within your banking environment. So this really is a big data problem. This is not something to be solved by trying to squeeze the data out of your core systems into your data warehouse every week and go back and look at that data. So we've built a real-time architecture to be able to bring this data in, handle huge volumes of it, and provide you with near instant access to it, and to provide highly visual tools for consuming that information. So the solutions that iNetco provides really are packaged solutions with customization available on top of them to solve specific problems in ATM and self-service, omnichannel, digital banking, et cetera. So we've really built a full technology infrastructure behind the scenes so that you don't have to worry about how you cope and scale with this data and bring it in from different places and model it and all the rest of that. That is something that we solve as part of our solution and what we provide to you. And it's built on a common architecture so that you can use the same infrastructure across channels. So you're making an investment perhaps driven by the interests of one channel, but you're able to scale and amortize this investment across all of your channels. And lastly, before we open up for questions, I just wanted to give you an overview of who we are so you can engage where this information is coming from. So iNetco, we're a Canadian company. We're headquartered in Vancouver. 30-year history in the transaction monitoring and analytics space, and we really are experts in transaction monitoring and analytics. Every single software engineer, professional services person, salesperson lives and breathes transaction monitoring and analytics. It's not a part of our business. It's not an offshoot. It is our business. We have multiple patents around the core technology that we use to do all of this. And as I mentioned, we have a long history in this space, and we've actually been delivering customer solutions for monitoring and analytics for almost 10 years now. And that's allowed us to really build a world-class customer base. And we're able to serve from the largest global banks and processors all the way down to regional banks and community credit unions. And there's a value proposition in our software for all of them, and we really focus on minimizing cost of deployment and overhead so that we can scale across that full range of institution size. And last but not least, I'd like to open things up for questions. So there should be a questions button on your interface there. If you'd like to submit a question, please do that now, and we'll work our way through them. And I'll start with the first question that I've got in here, which is, do you include walk-in traffic as well as drive-up traffic in your solution? And within those channels, do you have a solution that effectively collects the nature of the interaction? Yeah, this is a great solution. So yes, walk-in traffic as well as drive-up traffic. Essentially, as long as we're able to find a point to monitor the transaction or the interaction data from, then we can bring it in. So if we need to blend in traffic counting data coming into your branch or traffic counting data coming through the drive-up lanes, we can bring that in. Obviously, if you've got a self-service device that's in the lobby versus drive-up, we can model that. We actually have different models for them because it takes a little bit longer typically for someone in a car, in a drive-up scenario, to complete a transaction than it does in the branch. You're just reaching a little bit more, and the actual length of that session in terms of being able to move customers through is a little bit slower. It's faster to stand in line and then walk up to the machine than it is to actually stay in the holding area and queue through in a car. So yeah, we have lots of different ways to handle that and collects the nature of those two different interactions and models them differently. Next question I have is, what are the most obvious applications of customer interaction data once you have it? Yeah, I think to me there really are three most obvious areas out of the gates. One is monitoring the customer's experience and understanding it. Two is making placement decisions, whether those are branch placement decisions, device placement decisions, even mobile platform decisions. And the third one is really understanding your transaction mix and seeing for an individual customer, or more importantly for a segment of customers, what does their transaction mix look like, so you can figure out how to target them differently and how to serve them differently. In all three of those cases, to me, you're gathering information that is helping you figure out how to deliver a better customer experience, how to improve the profitability of the channel by finding new revenue opportunities, or by driving down your cost structure. Next question is, what type of predictive analytics can we do? This is a great question, because analytics increasingly is not just about looking backwards and seeing what has happened, but looking forwards and seeing what might happen. And so being able to forecast and predict and see the future to some degree is often the promise and often the business case that gets an analytics investment off the ground. So to me, the key predictive analytics we're able to do fall into three areas. One is simply around volumes, being able to understand where transaction volumes might move, how they might move, which can help you determine an investment strategy. Second is around cash, which is obviously one of the more expensive things for us to move around our environment, being able to see when it's needed and where it's needed. And third is around performance incidents and being able to see when we might have an availability problem in the self-service channel, when we might have a slowdown or a response time or an overload issue in the mobile channel, for instance. Being able to predict and spot those incidents so that you can get ahead of it is really important. And often this comes down to, simple demand planning, understanding when are your particular branches or when is your mobile application or a particular feature most likely to be hard hit. In Canada, we have our deadline for RSP contributions coming up at the end of February. And that tends to be the Super Bowl of Canadian banking, when most of the transactions happen. Everyone is trying to hurriedly transfer money from account to account. So probably a transfer becomes the most popular customer transaction for about a 48-hour period there as everybody tries to hit that window. So being able to predict and see that pattern and understand its effect and see whether people are beginning to make those contributions over the mobile channel versus going into the branch and doing it there, and understanding that mix and sizing your infrastructure appropriately for it is really important. Okay. What are the main hurdles to getting an analytics program off the ground? And the good question here was, is it infrastructure, budget, staff, leadership, outside pressures? The easy answer is it's all of the above. The harder answer is, it does come down to leadership. You have to have a leadership that either believes in becoming data-driven or that is supportive of your own belief that you need to become data-driven. Following that, I think the next piece is really having the infrastructure in order to become data-driven. So being able to access that consumer interaction data and being able to make sense of it. And I think that's where a lot of analytics programs stall, because most banks have invested a lot in analytics, but they've invested it in financial or product analytics, and there's a big data warehouse somewhere, and there's a dedicated team that has the keys to that warehouse, and if you ask them nicely, they can get you data within 2 or 3 weeks, and if you ask them really nicely or you escalate it, you might get it within a week. But we've kind of created a whole department around data, and it's centralized, which is great, but it often isn't as rich as what we need, and as channel executives, we don't have the access to it that we'd like to have. And often that data is very siloed, and so it doesn't reflect the full customer interaction, which is what we want to get at. What's been holding back the use of big data in retail banks the most? Was it disorganized and siloed data? Is it time to get results? Is it a shortage of data scientists? Is it concerns about privacy? This is a really interesting one, because when you look at the hype behind big data, a lot of it has been about this notion of the rise of the data scientist, someone to help you make sense of all this data, someone who has a combination of a deep experience in medieval literature, mathematics, programming, and physics, and bringing that all together to help you understand where you should position your branch counter. And I don't mean to be skeptical. Data science is an important domain, but it's something where I believe you should be looking to your technology providers to bake that knowledge into the products and the solutions that they offer you. In other words, the data scientists should be sitting in the software companies producing the models and the algorithms that you can use to get data into a ready-to-analyze state. Sort of a question that's related to this. Big data solutions are often complex and maintenance expensive. As Ineco is an integrated solution with a big data solution, where does the implementation, maintenance, and extension of the data collection portion of your solution delineated from the customer-based extension of accessing the data store created? Additionally, how are user-based models included in the solution? Okay, so that's a good chunk of a question there. So I guess just to catch everyone else up on the phone, so the Ineco solution includes a big data store, a Cloudera Hadoop data store that can scale very nicely and store all the data that we want. Part of our solution offering is implementing that as part of our packaged product, helping you size it and determine as your data needs grow where you're going to need to invest to scale the data source itself. All of the data collection is included in our solution, so getting the data out of your transactional data stores, pulling it out of real live network streams in many cases and bringing it into that data store, that's all part of the solution. The delineation really between the work that we do and the work that you do is our customers are free to create all the visualization and presentation pieces they want, the dashboards, the reports. There's a tool that's packaged with our product called Tableau that provides you the environment to do that. Our services team can create those reports for you, but you're free to create your own, modify those, change them as much as you want. But essentially what we deliver to you is a way to access the data and all the data streams. We deliver the data store to you. We deliver all the models and algorithms and math and data science to make sense of it. And then we deliver a set of dashboards and templates that give you access to that data. And then you're free to modify those templates however you choose. Okay. Next question, kind of a blue sky one. What do I think are the biggest threats to established retail banks? Is it data giants? Is it fintech? Is it challenger banks? This is a good question. To me, I think the biggest threat is actually your customers feeling like they can accept a fragmented experience instead of going to a single provider to get all of their banking services. Because really, when you look at what's happening in the banking space, we've got a bunch of different fintech providers who are trying to carve out lucrative parts of the banking business where customers perhaps feel like they're underserved. So they're trying to take a chunk of payments, or the peer-to-peer exchanges, or things like that. And I think your strength as a bank is that you have the complete solution offer. So your biggest threat is that your customers are willing to piece together 3 or 4 or 5 different apps and banking relationships in order to get what they want. You need to be able to deliver and communicate that your value proposition as an integrated provider is better. And that really comes down to, again, understanding that omni-channel mix. You're the only one that can offer all those channels to the customer. How do you make the most of all of them and bring them all to bear on what a customer wants? How many of our customers have a clear and effective data and analytics strategy across multiple departments? Wait, that's it. I should have asked that as a poll question. That would have been a good one. This is something, obviously, we very actively work with our customers on. So when you see testimonials from customers like BECU, Boeing Employees Credit Union, you'll see that really it's been a partnership between us and them in terms of working on their data and their analytics strategy. And so we've been able to bring some knowledge of the technology and the environments to play. They obviously have phenomenal domain knowledge and understanding of their customers, and we've worked with them to marry those two together into a solution. And that's what we do with all of our customers. Okay, last question here. In what areas, and this is kind of a nice end cap question, in what areas do you think improved customer interaction data would benefit retail banks? I think this comes down to some pretty straightforward things at the end of the day, and it's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to retain customers in the face of competitive threats. We're trying to acquire new customers, or acquire new business from existing customers, which can be just as lucrative, if not more lucrative. And we're all trying to figure out our channel mix and what the right channel mix is for the right customer and the right customer segment. And at the end of the day, this comes down to spotting those different customer interaction signals, regardless of the channel or the technology that's used, and being able to act upon them, being able to recognize them and see them for what they are and do something about it. And so I think really the area that the customer interaction data benefits banks the most is in this drive to become data-driven and this drive to really optimize the customer experience. And I think that's where the customer interaction data helps. And with that, it looks like we've drawn to a close on the questions. If you do have questions that you think of after the fact, or that you don't want to ask in a public forum, my email address is up here. I'd invite you to email me any questions you might have after the fact. I'd also encourage you to rate today's presentation. If you liked it, let us know. If you didn't like it, let us know as well. And especially if you didn't like it, or if you'd like to see us focus on something else, again, my email address is there. I'd love to learn more. This is the first of a series of webinars we'll be producing this year, and your feedback at this point can really help us guide what we focus on and where we put our energies so that we can give you the best information. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.